Part 45. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 441. Because there were guests, Nan 11 gave up the decision to stay for lunch. Taking advantage of the snowflakes, she decided to go back to the palace with Rong Yu. Some of the ladies who came to the princess's mansion to pay New Year's greetings actually came for the queen. They knew that Her Majesty the Queen and the regent were in the princess's mansion before they came. However, from entering the mansion to sitting down to drink tea, they did not even see the queen. Nan 11 had no intention of meeting them, so they naturally could not see them. Quickly walked out of the warm pavilion, Yin Yu came over with an umbrella, and covered Nan 11, who was wearing a cloak, tightly. However, this was obviously not enough. Rong Yu used the old method. After Qing Yang tied the cloak on his shoulders, he directly picked up Nan 11 and lifted the thick cloak to wrap Nan 11 tightly. Qing Yang was tall, took the umbrella from Yin Yu's hand and held it over his master's head, and followed behind. Nan 11 was held by Rong Yu. After a while, she poked her head out of his arms and ordered, "Yin Huang, go and tell my mother. I won't go there." Yes, Yin Huang turned and left. Yin Yu and Qing Yang followed Rong Yu on the left and the back. When Yin Huang walked away, Qing Yang smiled and said, "Yin Huang is now a full-time errand runner." Yin Yu's eyes turned slightly and looked at him without any expression. "What about you?" "Me?" Qing Yang was puzzled. "What's wrong with me?" "You are just a full-time gatekeeper," Yin Yu said. "The gatekeeper is worse than Yin Huang." Qing Yang was speechless. He was obviously the master's personal shadow guard and attendant. He used to serve the master personally, whether it was the study or the bedroom, there was no problem in following him in and out. But since the master married Nan 11, he could not enter and leave the bedroom at will. After all, he had to pay attention to the difference between men and women. If he was negligent in etiquette and accidentally offended the female master, the prince would probably chop off his head directly. Now in Dongling, the rules are stricter. The former princess has become the empress above all others, and she must be more careful about etiquette and must not make any mistakes. But his master still stayed in the palace of the emperor and insisted on living together. So his status as a close shadow guard and attendant plummeted, and now he is not as prominent as Yin Yu and Yin Shuang in front of the master. Originally, he didn't feel wronged, but when Yin Yu said this, he suddenly felt very uncomfortable. "Who is as lucky as you, and has become a favorite in front of the emperor? I have a hard life, and I am only suitable to stand at the door on duty." Yin Yu glanced at him quietly. "Are you still wronged?" Qing Yang snorted coldly, not wanting to pay attention to her. "Don't be wronged." Yin Yu pinched his face casually. "Sister will protect you in the future." Qing Yang held an umbrella in his hand, so he didn't dare to stop her with a big move, and sneered coldly, "Who is the sister? Don't you know who is older and who is younger?" Yin Yu didn't blush. "I'm a big shot in front of the master. It's good that I didn't ask you to call me aunt." Nan 11 snuggled in Rong Yu's arms and listened to the two bickering, with a slight curl of her lips. It felt like she hadn't heard these two people so lively and funny for a long time. However, Qin Jiang's current status and position are indeed not as good as before. It was her negligence. She thought about it and smiled. "Rong Yu, Qing Yang is a martial arts expert and loyal. After returning, he will be appointed as the first-class sword-bearing guard in front of the emperor. What do you think?" Qing Yang was stunned. The first-class sword-bearing guard in front of the emperor? So impressive? Rong Yu looked down at her. "Your Majesty's promotion is his blessing." Qing Yang heard this and quickly said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Then he thought about it and felt something was wrong. He explained in a tangled way, "In fact, I don't want to be promoted, Your Majesty." "You don't want to be a first-class sword-bearing guard?" Qing Yang's voice was stuck. "I do." "That's it. What are you worried about?" Nan 11 laughed. Are you afraid that I will misunderstand, or that your master will misunderstand? Qingyang knew the situation very well. Your Majesty is also Qingyang's master now. Rong Yu carried Nan 11 into the wide sedan chair. He didn't have any special reaction to Qingyang's flattery in front of him. As long as he could make Nan 11 happy, he would never stop it. He took the sedan chair back to the palace. When Yin Shuang reported the news to the princess, the ladies who accompanied the princess for tea knew that Her Majesty and the regent were going back to the palace, and they all came out to see them off. Her Majesty's sedan chair had already gone far away. The snow was not heavy, but there was wind, and the wind was mixed with the unique chill of winter. Rong Yu protected Nan 11 very well, and the cold did not invade her skin at all. It was not until the sedan arrived outside the palace that he personally picked up Nan 11 and walked quickly into the inner hall of the palace. The warm air hit his face, and he reached out to take off Nan 11's cloak. Nan 11 was used to his attitude of caring for her like a porcelain doll, and she cooperated quietly throughout the whole process. She sat down beside the brocade couch, and she felt like she had regained her freedom. Everyone get up. She looked at the palace servants kneeling on the ground in the hall and said in a light tone, "There is no need for too many formalities on weekdays, just do what you should do." The palace servants thanked him and stood up. Those who should make tea made tea, and those who should stand stood. Soon someone served hot tea and hand warmers. Qingling came over and knelt down respectfully to take Nangzi's pulse. In fact, there was nothing wrong with Nangzi's body, but the pregnant queen had just returned from outside the palace, so according to the rules, she should have her pulse checked. It was about the dragon fetus, so she had to make sure everything was safe. Nangzi cooperated and stretched out her wrist. After Qingling carefully checked her pulse, she felt relieved and bowed and left. Nan 11 sat in front of the window holding a cup of hot tea, reminding Rong Yu, "Don't forget to promote Qingyang to a first-class guard. By the way, Qingyang is not young this year, right? Do you have any plans to get married?" Qingyang, who was standing outside the palace, was originally moved by the queen's support for him, but he didn't expect that the topic would turn to marriage. Qingyang touched his nose and looked at the distant sky seriously. According to the rules, secret guards are actually not allowed to get married, and he didn't plan to get married. How good is it to be alone? No burden and no worries. Now he is still young and can fight and carry. When he is old and weak and can't be a guard, he will find a deep mountain forest to live in seclusion, grow vegetables on a 3-acre plot, and be self-sufficient. This life will pass like this. If you marry a delicate wife, you have to take the trouble to take care of her and please her. If you have children in the future, you have to split your attention to take care of them. What if you neglect your duties on the master's side because of something wrong with your wife and children, and the master blames you? Anyway, getting married is a very troublesome thing. I think Yunyu is good. Nan 11's eyes fell on Yunyu's face. She grew up with Qingyang, learned skills together, and knows everything about him. Especially, her temperament is similar. What? Qingyang was confused. Him and Yunyu. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 442. Yunyu has always been used to being carefree. She has practiced martial arts with Yin Shuang since she was a child. Although they have different temperaments, they are not shy girls at heart. But when he unexpectedly heard Nan 11's words, he couldn't help but be startled, and then he said quietly, "Subordinate and Qingyang." Nan 11 smiled lightly, "You don't want to?" "It's not that I'm unwilling." Yunyu frowned and said hesitantly, "It just feels weird." She and Qingyang were used to bickering and bickering. She felt that Qingyang was just a fool and it was easy to get along with him because there was no difference in status and there was no need to worry about anything. He didn't even care much about the differences between men and women. But now she wants to marry this idiot? Yunyu thought about it for a while, but it wasn't that she was very repulsive, but she couldn't imagine her life after getting married to Qing Yang. Could it be that she was still bickering all day long? But His Majesty offers marriage, so she can't refuse, can she? Yunya coughed lightly. Fu Shen lowered his eyebrows and said, "It's all up to your Majesty." She didn't plan to get married anyway. With her status and martial arts skills, to be honest, she has never thought about getting married at all, because it is too difficult to do. Marrying a rich young man will make it impossible for her to be a wife, only a concubine, but it is impossible for her to be beaten to death. Concubines. Moreover, some wealthy young men may have many bad habits, but she may not be able to like them. She would even look down on marrying an ordinary man. After all, ordinary men rarely learn martial arts. Most of them are weak scholars or illiterate rude men. They are either literate and shouting about the 3 obediences and 4 virtues all day long, or they are rough and shirtless men. She thinks about it. I feel that it is impossible to spend a lifetime with these 2 kinds of people. Either she can't stand others or others can't stand her. Maybe after getting married, she discovers some bad habits and she just punches the other person to death. Of course, the most important thing is that with their status, they are destined to live on a knife's edge. They don't even know how long they can survive. Who would think about getting married? That is to say, they are lucky and have a good master who knows how to be considerate of their servants. If they meet the kind of master who does not take the lives of their servants as their fate, they must be mentally prepared to die or be executed by the master at any time. During the day you can still see the sun shining brightly, but you may not even be able to see the moon at night. How can such a status be suitable for getting married? Yunya didn't feel much at first, but when she thought of this, she couldn't help but feel moved in her heart. In fact, it didn't matter whether they got married or not, but Nan 11 could think of her marriage and treat her as a human being. She hoped that she having a home, a house, and people to rely on each other, rather than dying alone and helpless. "Thank you, Your Majesty." She half kneeled and saluted again, with a respectful and grateful attitude, "Your Majesty. Your temperament is really not suitable for saying sensational words." Nan 11 chuckled, "You can do whatever you want. I am not an unkind master. Besides, men should marry when they are young, and women should marry when they are young. No matter where you are from, or how old you are in the future. You have to live your life now, right?" Yunya thought for a moment, then smiled and said, "Actually, this subordinate planned to serve his master for the rest of his life. Getting married won't affect your ability to do things by my side." Nan 11 said, "When you choose a suitable one later and marry Yin Huang, you will both have a good home, and I will feel at ease." "Your Majesty." Qing Yang walked in from outside the palace and stood at a distance with his eyebrows lowered and his eyes downcast in a respectful manner. "A stranger cannot be trusted, and it is better to know the truth from an acquaintance. If your Majesty is so interested, you can also marry Yin Huang to your subordinates." "My subordinates can do that." After the words fell, the hall suddenly became quiet. Nan 11 looked up in shock. Yunya turned to look at him expressionlessly. "What did you say?" Even Rong Yu, who was combing Nan 11's hair, looked up without hesitation. Qing Yang blinked and said to Yunya, "Marrying one is also a marriage, marrying two is also a marriage. We can just marry together. Won't the marriage between you and Yin Huang be settled? Don't worry, I will treat you fairly in the future. Never favor anyone. Are you looking for death?" Yin Yulu raised his eyebrows, and just saw Yin Shuang's figure in his sight. He turned around, punched him and came towards him, and greeted him. Yin Shuang beat him. "Let's see if he has the ability to eat us." Two people attacking together. Seeing that the situation was not good, Qing Yang reacted very quickly and rushed out with a swipe. "A gentleman talks but never moves? Who is a gentleman?" Yin Yu chased her out like a storm. "If I don't beat you until you have teeth all over the floor today, I won't be your aunt." Yin Shuang stood in the outer hall, watching the two people running away and chasing each other without moving, frowning slightly. feeling that the two of them were really childish. Nan 11, who stayed in the inner hall for a while, finally regained her composure and laughed. I didn't realize that Qing Yang still wanted to hug him. Ignore him. Rong Yu carefully combed her smooth hair and said in a calm voice, it's his blessing to marry someone. I think so too. Nan 11 hummed, one of Yin Yu and Yin Shuang is enough for him to deal with. You still want to have both? You're not afraid of having your legs broken? Don't mention it. If Yin Yu and Yin Shuang really join forces, Qing Yang really can't be their opponent. It's snowing heavily. Nan 11 turned to look out the window. Yin Huang, let the two of them take it easy and don't get caught in the cold. As he said that, he laughed to himself. Being a matchmaker is actually not bad. You can match up pairs of lovers. You can live a happy life and be happy to see others happy. Rong Yu was silent for a moment. Let Yin Yu go and find out some other time. Who are the girls from the imperial capital's aristocratic families who have not left the palace? When the right time comes, we can summon them to the palace in batches to drink tea and enjoy the flowers. If there are suitable ones, give them to them matched. Nan 11 was slightly surprised and turned to look at him. Are you serious? As the queen of a country, she is not diligent in government affairs, but is obsessed with granting marriages and being a matchmaker? Will she be drowned by the spit of the imperial censors? You can start with the daughters of the royal family. Rong Yu was obviously serious. Xian Yuan Jia from Prince Jing's mansion, Xian Yuan Dan from Prince Huai's mansion, and the girls from other county princes' families. Rong Yu. Nan 11 interrupted him with a chuckle. If you spoil me unconditionally like this, sooner or later you will spoil me into a tyrant. Rong Yu's voice was soft. No. Even if she really became a tyrant, she would still be her, and nothing would change. Rong Yu. Nan 11 raised the corner of her lips slightly. It has been so long since I ascended the throne, and the two of us have not attended the morning court once. The court meeting on the 6th day, I think it will be very lively. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 443. Rong Yu never thought that the court meeting would not be lively. If possible, he would rather stay in the Dajhan palace with Nan 11 and not see anyone. However, the emperor had always established his authority after ascending the throne, and in order to leave a good impression on the court officials, even the most unreliable emperor would work hard for a period of time to avoid leaving a handle for the censors to impeach him. The censors who always claimed to be upright, outspoken, and dignified dared to impeach the emperor. Therefore, Nan 11, the empress who has never appeared since she ascended the throne, is really a rare existence in all dynasties. However, on the one hand, she is pregnant, and needs to take care of the baby after the heavy coronation ceremony, which is excusable. On the other hand, she has a strong and cold regent beside her, who gave everyone an impression that he is not easy to mess with as soon as he stepped into the Dongling Palace. In addition, the caning of the Prince of Huainan in the military camp, the attitude of several young masters of noble families at the flower viewing banquet, and the decision to grant marriage to the Prince of Jing and Chu Hongii after ascending the throne, and finally directly sent the former Crown Prince Xian Yuanyan to the prison of the Ministry of Justice. All these things, one by one, are enough to make the ministers dispel all their dissatisfaction in their hearts. Now they don't even have time to guess the emperor's thoughts, so how dare they express their dissatisfaction casually? The first day of the new year passed in a relatively warm and peaceful atmosphere. In the evening, the palace ridges, the ground, and the treetops were covered with a thin layer of holy white snow, as if the entire palace was wrapped in a layer of pure white. Nan 11 sat in front of the window drinking tea. The palace was warm and comfortable, and she admired the silver-clad first day of the new year. Qing Yang was brought in by Yin Yu, twisting his ears. He begged for mercy as he walked, and he had lost the arrogance he had before, wanting to hug people left and right. Yunyu, let go. You are too rude, you are too rude, Yunyu. Qingyang lowered his body and reached out to grab Yunyu's presumptuous hand. Sister, aunt, you are my aunt, isn't that enough? I was just joking. I can't even afford to marry you, how dare I take the ice cube of Yin's Huang? Spare me, Sister Yunyu. The two maids and many maids in the hall looked at him in astonishment, and then they all covered their mouths and laughed, watching the Qingyang guards who were usually serious and solemn look so cowardly, and they found it particularly interesting. Nan 11 sat in front of the window, watching Yin Yu drag Qingyang from outside the palace to inside. The corners of her mouth could not help but rise, and she teased with interest, Qingyang, didn't you say you could do it? Why can't you do it now? Qingyang pulled Yin Yu's hand down with difficulty, and his ears were already red. Your Majesty, I was wrong. It's all my fault for being mean. I shouldn't joke about marriage. Your Majesty, please ask Aunt Yin Yu to forgive me this time. Yin Yu snorted coldly. I was really wrong. Qingyang looked at her eagerly, and his voice lowered a few degrees. In fact, I have always liked you secretly, especially the way you usually confront me. It's so cute. Yin Yu's pretty face blushed. Get lost. Okay, I'll get lost now. Qingyang ran outside the palace and stood there, not caring that it was snowing outside and it was very cold. Well, this little snowy weather is nothing to him. It's better than being pulled by the ears in public. It's cold, but at least it doesn't lose face. Nan 11 ignored Qingyang who had escaped, and looked at Yunyu jokingly. We chased him for an hour, what were you doing? Yunyu tidied her slightly messy hair and replied respectfully, I fought with him. Nan 11 laughed, fought for an hour. A duel between masters can last for 3 days and 3 nights without a clear winner. Yunyu said honestly, my martial arts are comparable to Qinjiang's, so it's normal to fight for an hour. If she wasn't afraid of delaying things and being blamed by the prince, she would have wanted to press that guy into the snow and make him into a snow sculpture, so that everyone in the palace could appreciate his grace. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. With this little ability, you dare to enjoy the blessing of having many wives? That's right, Yin Yu snorted, you don't know your own limits. Nan 11 couldn't help laughing again. Take care of him in the future. If he dares to treat you badly, tell me and I'll support you. Yin Yu smiled with her head down, yes, I will definitely not let him bully me. Qingyang, who was standing outside the palace, shuddered suddenly. Yin Chuang, who was standing at the palace door, glanced at him, snorted coldly, and a gloating light flashed in her eyes. It snowed heavily in the middle of the night, and it got heavier at night. The thin layer turned into a thick layer. When I woke up the next morning, it was white outside the window. This is the real snow. Nan 11 stood in front of the window and said on a whim, Yin Yu, I should let Qingyang build 16 snowmen for you as a betrothal gift, unique. Yin Yu yawned with her hands covering her mouth. Since I learned yesterday that I was going to marry Qingyang, I didn't sleep much the whole night. I'm not really excited, but I just couldn't sleep. I kept imagining how they would live after getting married. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't sleep. The more I couldn't sleep, the more I kept thinking about it, which directly led to 2 circles of shadows under my eyes when I got up this morning. When Nan 11 said this, she turned her head and glanced at her. She saw something strange. What's wrong? Didn't sleep well last night. Yin Yu sighed, her tone a little depressed. It's strange, although I'm not a little girl who gets shy when I hear about getting married, but I didn't sleep all night last night. Didn't sleep all night? Nan 11 was silent for a moment, raised her eyebrows and said, are you excited or nervous? There's no emotional change. Yin Yu frowned, I just kept thinking about this and that in my mind, thinking about all kinds of things, and then I couldn't sleep at all. Nan 11 said, how about you go to sleep again? No need. Yin Yu shook her head quickly, I can't sleep, and staying up all night is nothing to my subordinates. What used to happen often was that my face didn't look good, but there was nothing else. Your Majesty, don't worry. Nan 11 hummed and said, if you feel sleepy, just go to bed by yourself. I don't have anything important to do here for the time being, and there are enough people in the palace. Yunya responded, I understand. When I woke up in the morning and saw the vast white outside, my mood was completely different. Nan 11 spoke in a brisk tone and sat down on the brocade couch by the window. Is Rongyu in the study at the moment? Yes, Yunya nodded and placed the bird's nest porridge brought by the palace maid on the tables in front of Nan 11. Mr. Hua from Prince Jing's mansion submitted a document early in the morning. After reading it, the prince summoned several ministers into the study to discuss the matter. Been there for more than half an hour. Nan 11 frowned. Something happened. My subordinates don't know. Yunya shook her head. Your Majesty didn't say anything, and your subordinates didn't dare to ask. Before I went out, your Majesty just asked your Majesty to sleep well and not to allow anyone to disturb you. Nan 11 hummed and didn't think more about it. Anyway, no matter what happens, Rongyu has a solution, and he will tell her later when the discussion is over. Nan 11 ate a bowl of bird's nest porridge and stopped eating anything else. They waited for Rongyu to come back from discussing the matter and have breakfast together. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 444. Although Nan 11 didn't ask, Yin's Huang quickly reported a piece of news that made people have to think about it. Except for Xie Xiaofu, the ministers summoned by Rongyu to discuss matters in the imperial study, the other ministers Ling Fan, Xianyu Enyao, Xianyu Enqi, and Chu Hongii were all young upstarts. Ling Fan and Xianyu Enyao had been Rongyu's confidants for many years. Military General Xie Xiaofu was in charge of the military department, and Chu Hongii was also a general. Although Xianyu Enqi was here to accompany his wife, since Chu Hongii had taught him everything he had learned, he was also a man proficient in military strategy and formations. Experts gathered together, and the specifications of such a discussion inevitably made people think too much. Nan 11 frowned slightly. Was there something going on at the border with another country? Is there any unusual news recently? Nan 11 looked at Yunyu. Have you heard of it? Yunya shook her head. Master Xie and Master Mo are responsible for the intelligence here in Dongling. If they hear any news, they will report it directly to the prince. For the time being, my subordinates and Xingyang will be responsible for the gossip inside and outside the palace. Nan 11 understood. The secret guards who follow their master closely naturally do not have that much time to understand the news from the outside, especially the trends of various countries in the world, which are all responsible for special personnel. Nan 11 guessed that most of the information in Rongyu's hands should come from Juxiao Pavilion's intelligence network. Those ubiquitous forces can collect important information in the fastest time and send it to Rongyu as quickly as possible. The place where it is located. Nan 11 had a strange feeling in her heart. The Prince of Northern Xinjiang and the Prime Minister of Nanyu are currently staying in Dongling and have not yet returned, but their stay is not too long to cause Nanyu and Northern Xinjiang to raise troops and mobilize many dignitaries. The presence of Yeqing Cheng and Yunding in the Shu Kingdom was stirring up internal strife in the court, and an undercurrent was raging. The emperor and princes were too busy taking care of themselves. How could they have the energy to cause trouble again? The power struggle between the regent of Ziki and the young emperor could not be resolved overnight. Not to mention Das Hu, with King Yun here and the right-hand man assigned to him by Rongyu, Das Hu should be relatively stable. So why did Rongyu summon so many generals early in the morning? Nan 11 took a sip of tea and looked quietly outside the window. She was thinking about something when suddenly a pure white petite figure jumped into her sight. At that moment, she thought she was dazzled because it was completely white outside. The little things that pass by are the same color as white snow, and it is normal for their eyes to be dazzled. Nan 11 was about to open the window to take a look, when suddenly a ball of snow came towards her and hit the window lattice in front of her. Nan 11 was startled, and she subconsciously stepped back. Yin Yu, who was standing beside her, had a sudden change of expression. She opened the window and said coldly, "What's going on? Who is acting arrogant outside?" The guards outside the Taisho Palace heard the commotion and rushed towards the window. They looked left and right and saw no suspicious figures. However, it was true that Her Majesty the Queen was frightened, so many guards knelt down in a swarm. "His Majesty. What's going on?" Yin Yu stared at the obvious snow stains on the window, raised her hand to wipe the remaining snow on the window lattice, and asked in a cold voice, "Who did this?" Nan 11's eyebrows deepened slightly, thinking of the little white figure just now. She said calmly, "Everyone, get up, I'm not scared at all." Yin Yu was worried. The snow on the windows was clearly the result of a snowball thrown by someone. How could there be such a bold maniac in the Aoki Palace, the Taisho Palace where Her Majesty the Queen lives? It's a crime worthy of death. During the time when Yin Yu was asking questions, Yin Shuang had already sneaked out quietly and checked all the places on the ridges, pavilions, tree trunks, and corridors around the palace that could hide people, but there was no one there. "Saw someone suspicious?" Nan 11 said again, "Everyone, go down." The guards looked a little uneasy, fearing that Her Majesty the Queen would make the regent angry. If the charge of poor protection came up, it would be a light matter to chop off their heads. Although Nan 11 spoke in a calm tone and showed no signs of displeasure at this time, they still did not dare to take it lightly. They quickly returned to stand in line, cheered up, and patrolled more cautiously and on high alert. Eyes look in all directions, ears listen in all directions. Don't try to escape their eyes even at the slightest sign of trouble. Yin Yu was afraid that the cold wind would hit Nan 11, so she quickly closed the window, but her eyebrows were still locked. "Your Majesty, I still think this matter is suspicious." "It's okay, don't worry." Nan 11 smiled lightly, "I seem to have seen a ferret just now." "Ferrets?" Yin Yu was stunned and turned to look out the window suspiciously. "Where did the ferret come from? Originally I thought it was my own eyesight, but this snowball was thrown by a ferret. I must have read it correctly." Nan 11 chuckled, and then felt suspicious. "But why are there ferrets in this palace? The emperor's grandfather and do any of his concubines have such a pet?" Yin Yu shook her head, "I've never heard of it. I'll ask someone to ask." But she thinks it's unlikely. Ferrets are very spiritual and do not easily recognize their masters. Which of the concubines in the harem can afford to keep them? "No need to ask." Nan 11 picked up the teacup and said in a brisk voice, "If it came for me, it should still show up. It's just being naughty at the moment." As he spoke, he added slowly, "I have a hunch that it should be coming for me." Yin Yu was surprised. "How can your Majesty be sure?" "Well, probably just by feeling." Before they finished speaking, a squeaking sound suddenly sounded outside. Nan 11 and Yin Yu turned their heads to look at the same time, and sure enough they saw a little snow-white thing holding onto the window. With 4 claws, it screamed at Nan 11, "Squeak! Zhizzy!" Nan 11 stretched out her hand to open the window, but Yin Yu quickly reached out to stop her. "Master is in danger." "Squeak!" The little thing bared its teeth at Yin Yu fiercely. "Squeak!" Yin Yu frowned and stared at it warily. "Where are you from?" "Squeak!" "Who told you to come?" "Squeak!" "If you don't tell me, I will let the guards outside catch you and stew you in an iron pot. It will be fragrant and delicious." "Squeak, squeak." Yin Yu. Nan 11 laughed, "Don't scare it." While speaking, she quietly looked at the little beast clinging to the carved window. It was snow white all over, with beautiful fur without a trace of mixed colors. It looked fierce and bared its teeth, but it was inexplicably cute, like an ignorant little baby. Especially at this time, it seemed that it had not noticed that it was surrounded by a large group of guards behind it. It kept shouting at Yin Yu, as if it was arguing, and even looked like it would bite Yin Yu to death if it couldn't win the argument. Fortunately, Yin Yu was skilled in martial arts and had seen the world, otherwise she would have been scared to death. Nan 11 was about to order Yin Yu to open the window and let it in, but she saw the guards suddenly kneel down in unison, and then Rong Yu walked to the window, stretched out his hand to grab the little guy's neck and lifted it up, then turned around and walked in through the palace door. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 445. Rong Yu wore a brocade white robe today, which made him look handsome, and his noble features made him look like an immortal. His whole person looked a little less cold, but a little more refined and clean, making him look like an immortal. The posture of a heavenly being. Nan 11 was dazed for a moment, then chuckled, "The way you are dressed today reminds me of the time I was at the regent's palace before. I can't help but wonder if you deliberately want me to fall for you." The snow-white little beast kept squeaking in Rong Yu's hand, obviously protesting his rudeness, but Rong Yu seemed not to hear it and ignored its struggle. Walking up to Nan 11, he looked at her smiling face and whispered, "Are you scared?" The little beast suddenly stopped barking and stared at Nan 11 quietly and warily, with an obviously nervous expression. Nan 11 looked at it silently, then raised her eyes to look at Rong Yu. "What if I'm scared?" "Yunyu." Rong Yu threw the ferret to Yunyu, "Take it and stew it to replenish your majesty's health." The ferret was so frightened that it wanted to run away, but Rong Yu and Yin Yu were both masters. No matter how agile it was, how could it be Rong Yu and Yin Yu's opponent? Escape is as difficult as climbing to the sky. So when it fell into Yin Yu's hands, it suddenly let out a squeaking pitiful cry, squeak. The ferocity he had when he argued with Yin Yu was completely gone. Nan 11 thought it was too cute, and its cry was really pitiful, so she quickly said, "It didn't scare me. Yin Yu, the prince is just kidding you, you must not stew this little cutie, look at how beautiful its hair is." The little guy immediately felt relieved when he heard this, and struggled to jump into her arms, but Yin Yu didn't let go, and he couldn't jump even if he wanted to. "The fur is nice, you can peel it off and make it into a fur collar," Rong Yu said calmly. "It happens to be cold now, so it can keep out the cold." Nan 11 saw with her own eyes that after Rong Yu said these words, the little beast suddenly trembled. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. "It actually understands what we are saying." As he said that, he reached out and took the little thing from Yunyu's hand, put it on his lap, and gently stroked its soft and flawless fur. "It's so soft." The ferret shrank into her arms, lazily curled up on her belly, eyes narrowed, looking extremely enjoying himself. Rong Yu's eyes were narrow and focused, staring at the little thing who didn't know whether to live or die. There was a faint cold light flowing in his eyes. "Yunyu, inform the imperial kitchen to add an extra meal at noon." "Yes." The ferret shuddered and opened its eyes to stare at him warily. "It seems that ferret meat is inedible," Nan 11 said. "Is it poisonous?" The ferret was shocked when he heard this and nodded repeatedly. "Zizzy. Don't eat it, don't eat it, you will be poisoned if you eat its meat." Nan 11 laughed. "Just too cute." Rong Yu was not happy to find out that Nan 11 had been captured by a little beast. She felt sour for a moment, but her face remained calm. "Are you really falling for me?" Nan 11 was slightly stunned, raised her eyes to look at him, nodded and chuckled, "Yes." "Then throw it out." "Why?" Nan 11 was puzzled. "By the way, where did this little mink come from?" "A little pet raised by Juxiao Pavilion." Rong Yu was silent for a moment and said calmly, "No." "Then it?" Rong Yu reached out to lift the ferret from her legs and threw it back to Yunyu. "Take it down." "Yes." The ferret made a few protests, but when his eyes met Rong Yu's indifferent eyes, all his momentum suddenly died down and he was led away obediently by Yin Yu. "Have you seen this ferret?" Rong Yu sat down next to her. "Someone may come to Dongling in a while." "Someone?" Nan 11 was puzzled. Who is it? A willful person. Wrong. You sounded very calm, as if he was inexplicably disgusted with this person, but had to tolerate it for some reason. The ferret is his pet. Nan 11 leaned on the brocade couch and pondered. After a moment, she said calmly, "Speak directly if you have something to say. I don't like to play riddles." Wrong. You raised his eyes to look at her. Nan 11 also looked at him, but her face was expressionless. There is a prince in the U kingdom who is indifferent to fame and wealth and dislikes government affairs. He is 18 years old this year. Wrong. You lowered his eyes. He is good at divination and hexagrams, predicts the future, and has extremely deep cultivation. U country? Nan 11 was puzzled. Isn't the territory of U country very small? Wrong. You nodded. The territory of U kingdom is not large. It is located south of the border between Dezhou and 11 Qi. It was attached to Ziki more than 10 years ago. Later, the young emperor came to the throne. It was this prince who used tricks to change U kingdom's weak situation. Let the regent Lin Ao promise that Yu Guo will no longer pay tribute, and it will be comfortable to live in peace for these years. So, Nan 11 frowned. Could this prince also have memories of his past life? Or does he have anything to do with me? Wrong. You pursed her lips, her expression looking a little unhappy. Did I guess it right? Nan 11 was stunned. What's going on? Wrong. You was silent for a moment. He is an old friend, you know. Nan 11 looked at him quietly, her expression a little subtle, but more of a curiosity. After all, someone who could make Wrong You hate him but feel helpless must be quite powerful. Nan 11 couldn't help but look forward to it, and turned to look at the people in the palace. All of you, go down. Yes. The palace people bowed their knees and bowed, and quickly filed out. You can say it now. Wrong. You looked at her silently. 11 you seem to be looking forward to it. Nan 11 touched her face. Is there any? Do you still remember what I told you before, that Dan Shu passed the throne to her nephew before she died? Wrong. You narrowed her eyes. Actually, it was originally going to be passed to her younger brother, but the high priest said that her younger brother was short-lived. Prime Minister, if you become the emperor, you will definitely not live until 30, but if you don't become the emperor, you may live a few more years. Nan 11 thought about it for a moment. I remember you said that in order to avoid the struggle for the throne, the emperor waited several years before having a second child after Danju. Is the younger brother you are talking about the second-ranked prince? Wrong. You hummed. The second prince has admired Danshu since he was a child. The relationship between the siblings is extraordinary. Nan 11 calculated the ages of the second princes in her mind. She remembered that Wrong You said that when Danshu was 16, the eldest prince was only 12 years old, let alone the eldest prince who had a conflict with Wrong Huijin. Because Wrong You said that he died early and had problems with his life experience, so he was not included. Danshu was only 30 years old when she died, and her eldest brother was 26. The other princes were younger, so only the eldest brother had the greatest possibility of getting married and having children. So, the nephew is the son of this prince. Wrong You nodded. But this child should be still young. Nan 11 frowned. Even if the prince gets married at the age of 20 and has a child soon after getting married, the child will only be 4 or 5 years old. Can you ascend the throne at the age of 4 or 5? This was the best way at the time to avoid chaos in the court. Wrong You said. Dan Shu issued a final edict, and the young emperor ascended the throne and ordered the second prince to be the regent for his father until the young emperor turned 16 and returned to power. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 446. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. Dan Shu died at the age of 30, the second prince must be very sad. Wrong You hummed. It is indeed sad enough. Nan 11 heard that his tone was a little strange, and looked up at him. You don't get along with this person. Yerong Yu suppressed the annoyance in his heart, and didn't care that Nan 11 was talking about him instead of Rong Huijin. He is a disgusting person. Disgusted? Nan 11 was puzzled. Dan Shu had a good relationship with this second brother. When she died, she could pass the throne to his son and let this second brother become the regent of the emperor father at a young age. In fact, it was equivalent to completely controlling the power of the government before the little emperor turned 16. It was no different from the emperor. In the previous life, Rong Huijin loved Dan Shu the most, so why did he think that the second prince was a disgusting person? Nan 11 has not yet recovered the memory of the period before his death, and has not read much recently, so he doesn't know the history of the young emperor ascending the throne. The two chatted for a while, and the palace servants quickly prepared breakfast, and the topic ended there. The next 2 days were still calm and peaceful. But this peace did not last long. Dongling, which had just been calm for a while, soon set off a turbulent wave again. On the 5th day after the New Year, the day before the resumption of the court on the 6th day, the 800-mile urgent intelligence was sent by the border spies day and night, bringing anxiety that caught everyone off guard. The Nanya border has increased its elite troops by 60,000, and is heading to Dongling from Yuguo. The leader is Yun Che, the king of Yubei, the younger brother of the Nanyu emperor. He came in the name of marriage and is willing to use the 9 cities of Yubei as a betrothal to marry the queen of Dongling for the Nanyu emperor. As soon as this news came out, the whole court was in an uproar. The peace that had been maintained in the entire imperial capital for more than half a month was broken, and all the major elders and important officials in the court were furious and indignant. It's outrageous. The king of Nanyu is too much. How can the queen of Dongling accept such an insult? Don't say that the queen has been married. Even if she is still in the boudoir, she is on an equal footing with the king of Nanyu. What qualifications does he have to talk about marrying? Yes, even if you want to marry into the family, it depends on whether the king is willing. 9 cities as a betrothal? What a joke. The ministers expressed their indignation and said bluntly that if Nanyu really didn't know what was good for them, Dongling would definitely not mind fighting. Don't think that Dongling is really afraid of war because it has liked peace for hundreds of years. As the queen of a country, she will not tolerate anyone to offend or belittle her. This represents the face and dignity of the entire Dongling royal family. The ministers did not hesitate to take a unified attitude towards the outside world. They were all loyal and tough. However, in the face of such provocation, Rong Yu's attitude was so calm that it made people feel strange. After calming down, several thoughtful ministers in the court could not help but feel suspicious. Logically speaking, the king of Nanyu should not be so stupid. Dongling and Dazhu are already one family. Dazhu is a strong country, and Dongling is not weak either. After becoming in-laws, they are even more powerful. No matter how powerful Nanyu is, it is impossible for it to defeat the strength of the two countries. He suddenly came up with such a move. Was he bewitched by someone, out of impulse, or had other plans? As expected, on the 6th day of the New Year, the court was resumed early in the morning. After the civil and military officials had just performed the kowtow ceremony and shouted "Long live the king," another 800-mile express horse rushed to the palace gate. A low-ranking general in military uniform quickly stepped into the palace hall and knelt down to report, "The 6th Prince of Northern Frontier led 80,000 elite soldiers and borrowed the road from Yan State to bypass the Great Zhou. He is rushing to the border of the northern city of Dongling. He wants to use the annexation of Yan State and the 7 cities of the surrounding northern frontier as a betrothal gift to marry our queen of Dongling." The words fell, like thunder in the plain. The ministers were subconsciously stunned, and then an idea came to their minds at the same time, which was simply absurd. Are Nanyu and Beijiang both so bold? It must be a conspiracy between the two countries to ask for the queen of Dongling one after another. The hall was silent, and the court officials looked at each other in silence, thinking that the regent must be furious. Although this was only the first morning court after the queen ascended the throne, they had heard how jealous the regent was. The queen's choice of a husband would make him unhappy. How dare Nanyu and Beijiang openly propose a betrothal gift? The two countries' actions will surely cause a sensation in the world, and the dignitaries of various countries will pay attention to this matter. How will the regent respond? Or, will he directly give a thunderous revenge? On the danbai in front of the hall, Nan 11, dressed in a noble dragon robe, sat quietly and steadily on the dragon chair, and her voice was calm and calm. My dear ministers, do you find it strange that Nanyu and Beijiang led troops to force marriage without warning? Rong Yu's eyebrows were indifferent, and there was a deep and cold color between his elegant and picturesque eyebrows. There have been rumors in Zhuzhou these 2 days that whoever gets the Queen of Dongling will get the world. Nan 11 smiled lightly, so this is not a sudden conspiracy between Nanyu and Beijiang, but the kings of various countries have the ambition to become the common master of the world, and this prophecy just gave them an excuse. What? The ministers were in an uproar. Whoever gets the Queen of Dongling will get the world. When did this prophecy arise? Why have they never heard of it? Of course, they must have believed in the truth of the prophecy, so they didn't hesitate to promise a rich city as betrothal gift, and even led troops to force a marriage. Nan 11 said calmly, because if they can really get me, they can quickly get the whole world. No matter how much betrothal gift they promise now, it will naturally return to their pockets in time. This is their wishful thinking. It's just a daydream, Prime Minister Lu said coldly. Don't talk about whether the prophecy is true or not. Even if it is true, what does it matter? How can they covet my Queen of Dongling? If Nanyu and Beijiang really dare to come, the Dongling Iron Cavalry will make them come and not leave. The Prime Minister is right. Prime Minister Xie nodded lightly. Don't say that the Prince of Beijiang is still in our hands. If Beijiang really has a tough attitude, tie up Duanmu and Situ Suanju and bring them to the front to see if the sixth prince who leads the troops will be afraid of the consequences. If he insists on not changing his attitude, just let them kill each other, and the Dongling troops will fight Beijiang to the death. The Prime Minister of Nanyu may not be as important as the Crown Prince of Beijiang, but if the Nanyu troops really want to enter Dongling, they must pass through the Huainan border. The Huainan king guarding the border is enough to resist with only 60,000 troops. As for other countries, the Great Zhou should not get involved in this absurd ambition. Ziki has not made any move yet. Even if it joins in the fun, the Great Zhou can send troops to contain it so that Dongling will not be besieged by the three kingdoms. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 447. As for those small countries, except for the fact that they played a role in borrowing the terrain in the middle, the others can be completely ignored. So even if the so-called prophecy really aroused the ambitions of various countries, Dongling was not without the ability to deal with it. Thinking of this, Prime Minister Xie couldn't help but think of what the Regent King discussed in the imperial study on the morning of the second day of the new year. Several generals were assigned tasks. Although Chu Hong'ai was inconvenient to take care of her pregnancy, she had learned about the generals of various countries in recent years and had done a lot of research on the border terrain. Although she couldn't personally use the military strategy, she could give others some more reliable advice. And that night Rong Yu summoned Xie Jin and Mo Ling'an again. The Prime Minister later asked his son specifically, and Xie Jin only said that Dongling was about to usher in some turmoil, but the Regent King had a way to deal with it. He didn't say much about the rest. The Prime Minister didn't ask any more questions. After all, even if they were father and son, some things had to be done according to the rules, and things that shouldn't be revealed had to be kept secret. But now I think about it, Rong Yu obviously knew about this matter a long time ago and made careful arrangements in advance. The Prime Minister's suggestion is good. Another minister agreed. The Prince of Beijiang is still in our hands. I don't believe that they really don't care about the life and death of the prince and are determined to marry my Dongling queen at the risk of the world's disapproval. That's right. Dongling has a regent, why should we be afraid of Nanyu and Beijiang? The regent is a generation of war god, and Nanyu and Beijiang combined are not the regent's opponents. That's right, Dongling has the emperor's husband regent, and the wolf ambitions of Nanyu and Beijiang will never succeed. I don't know who started it first. The original angry conflict suddenly turned into flattery of the regent. Nan 11, who was sitting on the throne, had a subtle expression. She couldn't help but want to laugh, but she was worried about damaging the Queen's Majesty, so she just turned her head and looked at Rongyu silently. Rongyu pinched her soft palm, indicating that she should be patient and let the ministers speak freely first. The time for the morning court meeting was not very long, usually it was over in an hour or so. After the court meeting, the king would go to the imperial study to review memorials and discuss state affairs with trusted ministers. The court meeting would be extended to 2 to 3 hours only when encountering special events, but this situation was relatively rare, because even if there was an emergency, they could go to the imperial study to discuss and make decisions after the court meeting. If the ministers of different factions argued endlessly and expressed their own opinions, they could temporarily adjourn the court meeting and discuss it another day. However, it was rare for the regent to remain silent throughout the whole meeting and let the ministers speak. However, with the support of the prime minister and the chief assistant, the ministers in the palace seemed to be full of momentum and were not frightened by the forced marriage of various countries. After the ministers praised and flattered him enthusiastically, they suddenly found that the regent had not said a word from beginning to end, just sitting silently on the throne, with an expression that looked particularly unfathomable, making it difficult to guess what he was thinking. Anyway, no one could usually guess what the regent was thinking. However, the fact is that the matter of Nanyu and Beijiang forcing the marriage was discussed by the ministers for more than half an hour. Some of them gave advice, and some were indignant. The whole court was like a vegetable market, so that the ministers forgot the advice, speeches, and advice to the emperor to choose a husband on the first day of the new year. Your Majesty, Regent, the Prime Minister bowed and saluted. I don't know how to deal with the matter of Nanyu and Beijiang. Nan 11 looked indifferent. It's just bluffing, don't pay attention to it. Bluffing? Prime Minister Lu was stunned and almost thought he had heard it wrong. Didn't Her Majesty say that because of the prophecy of whoever gets the Queen of Dongling will get the world? Nanyu and Beijiang used tough means to marry the Queen of Dongling? Why is it a bluff now? Dongling has a strong military force and is not afraid of any country's invasion. Rongyu said indifferently, if Nanyu dares to come, be prepared for casualties. If Beijiang dares to come, let their crown prince and the sixth prince be buried in Dongling at the same time. In short, whoever dares to provoke will never be able to return intact. The ministers were startled and knelt down and shouted, Your Majesty is wise. The regent is mighty. Rongyu had no reaction to this. He calmly scanned the ministers in the hall and said in a faint voice, Are there any other things to report? On the first day of the court, there are of course many things to report. For example, the most important thing is the selection of a husband by the Empress. The ministers have already discussed it. Someone started it, and then others echoed it. They must let Her Majesty fill the harem. If it doesn't work today, it will be tomorrow. If it doesn't work tomorrow, it will be next month. In short, the Empress will definitely give an attitude when she is annoyed. However, plans are not as fast as changes. No matter how good their wishful thinking is, who dares to bring up this topic at this time? Seeking death. For example, regarding the former grandson of the emperor being imprisoned, since Her Majesty the Queen has granted marriage to Xian Yuanyan and Miss Fang, it is better to give a small punishment and let the former grandson of the emperor go back, so that the King of Wei and his family can be reunited. After all, Miss Fang cannot be left as a widow after suffering such a serious crime, right? However, who dares to speak up at this time? Even if they are not seeking death, their courage has been suppressed by the majesty of the regent. The ministers have been holding back for a long time and no one dares to speak out. There are also several censors who are said to be upright and incorruptible, and they have even prepared several manuscripts, all of which are impeachments against Sejin, the son of Prime Minister Xie, saying that he is disrespectful to the king of Wei, committing crimes, and that he is not doing his job in the brothels, and that he is a homosexual and has improper behavior. In short, all of Sejin's unruly behavior in recent days has been recorded in the small notebooks by the censors, who are ready to impeach him and let Her Majesty know their righteous demeanor. However, the censors also held their breath at this time, and kept the virtue of silence. For example, the investigation of the case by the Minister of Justice. If there is nothing to report, the court will be adjourned. Wrong you stood up, his voice indifferent and calm. If there is a report to be submitted, send it to the Imperial Study, and Her Majesty will deal with it when she has time. After saying that, he stretched out his hand to hold Nan 11, who stood up, and the couple turned around and left together. A thunderous voice soon sounded behind him, "Farewell to Her Majesty the Queen, farewell to the Regent." When the Queen and the Regent completely disappeared from sight, the ministers realized belatedly what was discussed at the morning court today. Nothing was discussed yet, and they discussed the provocation of two countries for marriage. But Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent didn't seem to have given any countermeasures. Prime Minister Xie stood up and slowly adjusted his robes. "The court has been adjourned, and you gentlemen still have to kneel here? Isn't the ground cold?" Prime Minister Lu came over and spoke in a low voice, "You gentlemen have put all your energy into today's morning court. You thought you could be passionate and leave an impression in front of Her Majesty, but you didn't expect that it was disrupted by the invasion of South Vietnam and North Xinjiang. They haven't recovered yet. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 448. Xie Shaofu straightened the sleeves of his robe and walked out of the hall calmly. Prime Minister Lu also left. The other ministers could only sigh secretly, get up and leave resignedly, leaving the matters they planned to discuss today until tomorrow. After all, the top priority is to deal with the troops of South Vietnam and Northern Xinjiang, and other matters can be postponed later. However, facts soon proved that their wishful thinking was destined to fail. Before the next day, on the evening of the 6th day of the lunar month, another fast horse hurriedly arrived outside the palace gate. The regent of the Western Qi dynasty gathered 100,000 soldiers and horses, hired 3 fertile cities at the border, and asked to marry Her Majesty the Queen of Dongling. As soon as the statement came out, the imperial capital was in trouble again. Ziki, who was still in civil strife, actually got involved. Is this an opportunity to make a fuss, or is the prophecy really so appealing that kings from all over the world are determined to win the Queen of Dongling? The regent summoned the officials to discuss matters, and the relaxed atmosphere that had been there before disappeared instantly. The officials seemed to have a premonition of an impending storm, and all the important officials and generals in the court were called into the palace to discuss countermeasures. A crowded group of people stood in the imperial study room. Xian Yuanyao led the Black Yao Army's 5,000 cavalry to set off immediately to the north, and along the way, he searched for news about the soldiers and horses in northern Xinjiang. Rong Yu said in a stern tone, "If the military report is true, we will rush to the border at full speed, increase the number of troops for defense, and do not allow the troops and horses in northern Xinjiang to be used half a step into the defense line. The last general takes command. Ling Fan, you lead 5,000 Suanjia troops to the border of Mianzhou. If Lin Ao, the regent of the Western Qi dynasty, really comes with his troops and takes his head at all costs, I will never let him come back." "Yes," Ling Fan knelt down on one knee, "General, take your orders. Send a message to the king of Huainan, asking him to report." A high-pitched voice came from afar, and all the ministers in the royal study became nervous, and their expressions changed almost subconsciously. No way. Come again? Which country is provoking this time? Rong Yu's face was pale and could not be seen clearly. Pass. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure hurried in, knelt down and said, to the regent, Prince Zanruo of the Yu Kingdom has sent a message. Explain. In addition to South Vietnam, Northern Xinjiang, and Ziki, the kingdom of Zhou and Shu will soon join the battle to marry Her Majesty the Queen. If the regent wants to solve the current situation, sending troops is not the best strategy. As soon as these words came out, all the officials changed their expressions. Great Zhou and Shu? How is it possible? Dazhu is the in-law country of Dongling. Prince Zanruo has arrived outside the imperial city. He is bringing a message. The guard lowered his head, his voice getting lower and lower. Let the regent go out of the city to greet him in person. He can solve Dongling's current predicament. As soon as the words fell, the imperial study room became quiet for an instant. Who is so crazy? These days, there is still someone who dares to name Regent Yuzun to greet him. He was so arrogant that he knew no bounds. Prince Zanruo, Xie Xiaofu obviously knew a lot about world affairs. He frowned and said, the Prince of Yu Kingdom who is said to know astronomy and geography, and has the ability to predict the unknown. Prime Minister Lu felt that the name Zhanruo was familiar just now, but he couldn't remember who it was for a moment. When Xie Xiaofu said it, he instantly realized, yes, it's him. I remember that this prince seemed to be born with prophecy. Yes, you can know things that others don't know. The other ministers looked at each other. Prince Zanruo of Yu Kingdom? How come they haven't heard of it? What my father and the Prime Minister said is right. Xie Jin, standing in an inconspicuous corner behind the ministers, said calmly, Zanruo does have supernatural powers and is indifferent to fame and fortune. He likes to live a quiet and secluded life, so he has always kept a low profile. Not many people in the world know about him, because he doesn't like to be busy and rarely shows off his talents. His initiative to come to Dongling this time is beyond our expectations. Can't the high priest also predict things? An old cabinet minister among the ministers suddenly said, is this prince of the Yu Kingdom more powerful than the high priest? The atmosphere became quiet again. Yes, their high priest is the soul of Dongling. Even if it is necessary to divine destiny, it is not the prince of the Yu Kingdom's turn to come to Dongling to make fortunes. Besides, shouldn't the reason why Dongling takes over the power of the queen once every 200 years is to suppress the warlike nature in the blood of the royal family? Zhenqiu Gong said calmly, it stands to reason that after the queen ascends the throne, Dongling should have peace and prosperity in the world. Why did the emperors from all over the world rush to marry each other as soon as he ascended the throne, even going to war? The air froze. The expressions of the ministers present changed slightly, and they all looked at Duke Zhen in unison. Rong Yu's eyebrows suddenly turned cold, and she looked at him like a cold sword. What does Zhenguo Gong mean by this? I don't mean anything. The Duke bowed slightly, I just told the truth. The regent shouldn't stop the ministers from telling the truth. It is true that I will not stop you, Rong Yu said in a cold voice, but any words that are disrespectful to His Majesty and dare to question His Majesty will never be allowed by this king. This is a prohibition and a violation. You insist on it? If you offend, don't blame me for being ruthless. After that, he said coldly, here comes someone. Several imperial forest guards quickly entered the imperial study room and knelt down to obey orders. Strip off the title of Duke of Zhenqiu and demote him to the rank of Marquis. He will be fined half a year's salary. He will be exempted from court proceedings for 3 months. Take him away. Duke Zhen's expression suddenly changed. Prince Regent, you are taking this opportunity to exploit. Prince Zhenqiu, Prime Minister Lu said sternly, the imperial study is the place where all matters are discussed. How can you behave openly here by roaring? Duke Zhenqiu's expression was frozen, his cheeks twitching rapidly, and his anger and dissatisfaction could be clearly seen. But what's the use of being angry and disobedient? Even if, as he thought, the regent took advantage of the opportunity to reduce power and wanted to uproot the power of the Wei Palace, what could he do? If the king wants his minister to die, he must die. What's more, he just demoted the Duke of Zhenguo to Marquis. Duke Zhenguo was taken away by the royal guards with great reluctance. What he would face next would be a series of sudden drops in status, salary, fame, and power. 3 months of exemption from court proceedings. 3 months later, the forces in the court must have gone through a major purge. The regent will support those who obey him and gradually clean up the old party forces of the former emperor and grandson. This is what every emperor will do after he ascends the throne. Who will no exception. It's just that the regent has done all the things that the queen should do this time. There was a brief silence in the royal study. In fact, everyone knew that Prime Minister Lu's scolding just now was to save the Duke of Zhen. After all, disrespectful words only reduced his title and fined him his salary. If he continues to shout here, he will be disrespectful and provocative. What awaits him will most likely be treason. The whole family was sentenced to death. The Duke of Zhen also suddenly realized this, so he stopped talking in time. Rong Yu sat on the chair behind the imperial desk, tapping his pruned fingers on the sandalwood desk rhythmically, and said in a cold voice, "Anyone else who wants to question Her Majesty the Queen's accession to the throne can do so now." The important ministers knew how to kneel down to express their loyalty. "Your Majesty ascended the throne because of the public's expectation. I am convinced and do not dare to question it. Please be aware of it, the Prince Regent." Rong Yu's gaze was as cold as a knife, and it fell on the important minister in front of him with a strong pressure. Without saying a word, it could send chills down one's spine. "Xiejin is going to take Zhanruo into the palace." Rong Yu stood up and said in a cold tone, "If he wants to come, he will come. If he doesn't come, he will leave." With that said, he stood up and left. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 449. Leaving these words behind, he quickly left the imperial study room. The remaining ministers could not recover for a while. Then should I lead the troops north, or should I stay and wait? Xian Yuanyao turned his head, looked at Xie Chifu and Prime Minister Lu, then turned to look at the other ministers, and finally laid his eyes on Xiejin's face. "Mr. Xie, do you know what the regent means?" Xiejin glanced at him. "What do you think? Didn't you realize just now that the Lord's statement about sending troops to intercept was just a bluff?" Xian Yuanyao frowned. "Sending troops is not a joke, and there is no room for negligence. If there is no war but troops are sent without reason, it will cause panic among the people in the cities they pass by. If there is an enemy invasion but no timely response is made, the consequences will be disastrous." Xiejin's mouth twitched slightly. "I also have this question." Ling Fan looked slightly condensed and said thoughtfully, "Logically speaking, Ziki should not have sent troops to attack at this time, but the prophecy appeared weird, and the spy's information dash. Let's disperse." Xiejin turned around and walked out. "If you have any questions, you can go directly to the Dajhan Palace and ask, so you don't have to make random guesses here." If elite troops from northern Xinjiang really invaded, would his family leader react like this? Besides, Juxiao Pavilion's information is just a decoration. Xian Yuanyao is an honest child. As a military general, he has always known the importance and seriousness of military orders and cannot tolerate any uncertainty. Therefore, regardless of whether Xiejin's words were suggestions or jokes, after leaving the imperial study room, I went to the Taisho Palace. Ling Fan went with him. When Rong Yu returned to the inner hall, he saw Nan 11 teasing the ferret. with a gentle smile on her face. It seemed like the time was really peaceful, and all her irritable emotions were calmed down in an instant. Rong Yu walked over, reached out and picked up the ferret on her lap, turned around and threw it to Yunyu, "Take it and stew it." After spending 2 days together, the ferret knew that he was fierce in appearance and soft in heart, so he didn't dare to stew it, so he bared his teeth at him and said, "Zizzy. Humph, His Majesty is here, how dare he stew it?" Seeing that this little thing dared to be so presumptuous, Yunyu was both amused and afraid that she might really offend Rong Yu, so she quickly took it down. Nan 11 raised her eyes and smiled softly, "Is the conversation over?" Yes. Rong Yu lowered his head and kissed her face, and then said calmly, "Jeanruo is here." Nan 11 heard the boredom and dissatisfaction in his tone, and remained silent for a moment. It's probably not true that various countries are sending troops. He was the one who spread the prophecy. Rong Yu pursed his thin lips, and his brows were slightly cold. No matter how stupid the kings are, they cannot send troops to attack at this time, unless they are tired of living. Nan 11 thought thoughtfully, but those who rushed back from Babali to report the military situation should be the soldiers from Dongling. It's just a deception, Rong Yu said indifferently. A military commander with battlefield experience can use 3,000 soldiers and horses to create the illusion of 60,000 elite troops. What's more, Zanruo is proficient in heresy. If he wants to create such a deception, it is just a trivial skill for him. Nan 11 raised her lips, "You think highly of him?" Rong Yu looked at her displeased. "Are you angry?" Nan 11 raised her eyebrows, "You want me to kiss you?" Rong Yu lowered his head and silently moved his face towards her. Nan 11 smiled sullenly, held his face and kissed him, then kissed his lips tenderly, trying to be a submissive little wife. "If you don't want him to come, just kick him out. Anyway, I have no impression of him, let alone any feelings for him, so you are so jealous and angry for no reason." Although Rong Yu is possessive and always jealous, he is actually very easy to coax. After being kissed by Nan 11 and saying a few soft words, the gloomy mood in his heart was instantly swept away. Mainly, the sentence "I have no impression of him anyway, let alone any feelings for him" pleased him and made him feel better instantly. He came prepared this time. "Even if I drive him out, he will not give up," Rong Yu said calmly. "He can even use the low-level trick of siege by various countries, and he will not hesitate to cause panic among the Dongling court officials, which shows that this person has no bottom line." Nan 11 thinks Rong Yu is quite childish sometimes, but he is so childish and cute. "Well, you're right," Nan 11 nodded, "it's too messy, he should really be taught a lesson." Rong Yu was silent for a moment, his eyes fell on her face, and he didn't know what to say. Nan 11 agreed with him so much that he lost interest in continuing to belittle that annoying guy. My Lord Xianyu Enyao stood outside the palace door and quietly poked his head in. "Can I come in?" Rong Yu didn't say anything, kissed Nan 11 on the forehead, stood up and walked towards the outer hall. "Come in." Xianyu Enyao and Ling Fan came in one after another and saluted Nan 11, "See Her Majesty the Queen, see the regent." Both generals, no courtesy. Nan 11 smiled gently, "You guys are talking to Rong Yu about business, ignore me, just pretend I don't exist." "How can it be? Unless they also want to be punished by their lord, who dares to pretend that Her Majesty the Queen does not exist?" Xianyu Enyao stood up and looked at Rong Yu. "Your Majesty, do I still want to lead my troops north to stop the northern Xinjiang army?" "No need," Rong Yu said calmly, "the prince from Yu Kingdom has a way to solve this matter." "Ah?" Xianyu Enyao was surprised, "Is the prince of Yu Kingdom really that powerful?" Rong Yu said calmly, "Is the reorganization of the Suanjia army and the Black Obsidian army going smoothly?" "It went smoothly," Xianyu Enyao nodded. "The Lord has great prestige." When the Suanjia army learned that this was the Lord's arrangement, no one was dissatisfied. "General Ling has been cooperating with me these 2 days. We get along very well." Rong Yu did not comment on his flattery and said calmly, Ling Fan will leave for Dezhou early tomorrow morning and take over the military power of the Suanjia army from Qi Lin. He will appoint Qi Lin as the counselor of the Suanjia army and be your deputy. Tell King Yun that I will go back within this year and let him be ready to ascend the throne at any time. Go back within this year? Nan 11 turned to look at him and thought to herself that this year has just begun. Should I go back at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year? Yes, Ling Fan nodded his head and agreed, but his face could not hide his worry. The situation of siege by various countries, are you really going to ignore it? Rong Yu glanced at him, do you think the emperor of Nanyu is crazy, or the emperor of Beijiang is old and incompetent? Ling Fan was stunned. Xian Yuanyao was also stunned. What does the Lord mean? Is the 800-mile express information false? But if you lie about military intelligence, you will lose your head. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 450. Although Rong Yu only ordered Xiejin to welcome Zhanruo, the ministers were curious about this special guest. After the meeting, the ministers stood in the spacious place at the palace gate, waiting for the arrival of this guest. This wait lasted until dark. Xiejin rode out of the imperial city on horseback. When he saw the scene in front of him, he thought it was a courtesan parading in the streets. A gorgeous blue sedan chair was carried by 8 people. In the sedan chair, a slender figure was lying sideways, supporting her forehead with one hand, dozing lazily. The pillars on both sides of the sedan chair were made of carved pear wood. The blue gauze curtains hanging on all sides fluttered in the wind, which looked really like a fairy, showy atmosphere. The 8 people carrying the sedan chair were all teenagers, 4 of them wore white clothes and 4 of them wore black clothes, looking like the black and white impermanence. Even though Xiejin had been hanging around in the flower garden for years and was used to seeing the dress of coquettish girls and various playboys, he couldn't help but feel a little confused about the aesthetic style of the man in front of him. Prince Zhanruo, Xiejin asked, his phoenix eyes raised a smile, I am Xiejin, and I am here to welcome the prince to the palace on the order of the regent. There was no movement in the sedan for a while, only the winter wind blew across the sedan curtain, blowing up a corner of the light gauze curtain, vaguely revealing the cold jade-like porcelain white skin of the person in the sedan. Xiejin raised his eyebrows slightly, and raised a nonchalant arc at the corner of his lips. Prince Zhanruo fell asleep. This prince wants the regent to come and pick him up personally, the young man in the sedan spoke. His voice was as clear and pleasant as jade hitting an ice spring, but he revealed his willfulness and tyranny as soon as he spoke. Are you dongling ministers deaf, or is the regent's waist and legs not good and unable to move? Xiejin sat upright on the horse, his voice was light. Today's sunshine is not bad, but it is now the coldest time of the year. When the sun sets in the evening, the temperature will drop sharply, and it will be too cold for people to bear. Your Highness is wearing thin clothes. Do you want to wait here in the cold, or go to the palace with me to see Her Majesty the Queen, sit opposite Her Majesty the Queen in front of the stove, and drink a cup of hot tea to keep warm? It must be said that Xiejin understands the principle of attacking the city and attacking the heart first. The young man in the sedan originally wanted to put on airs again, but after hearing what he said, he was really silent for a while. Finally, he snorted coldly, this prince will give you this face. After saying that, he lightly ordered the young men carrying the sedan chairs on both sides, lift the sedan chair. Xiejin sneered, turned his horse's head and drove into the city gate. 8 young men carried the sedan chair. The speed was neither fast nor slow, it looked like a well-trained speed. If it was too fast, the wind would be strong, and the blue gauze curtain would be lifted, so that the face of the person in the sedan chair would be completely exposed to the public, losing the original sense of mystery. If it was too slow, there would be no feeling of floating in the air. So it was not good to be fast or slow, and the speed must be maintained at a speed that made the person in the sedan chair looming. Xiejin has always been good at dancing, and he was born with a face that can charm everyone. Most of the time, he is almost invincible. There is no man and woman in the city that he can't handle, but when he met this master Genruo, he kicked the iron plate. He took the initiative to talk to the other party along the way, and this person always looked indifferent. Xiejing couldn't help but wonder, where does this mere prince of Yu kingdom get such a big heir? Regarding the matter of sending troops to attack by various countries, it was Prince Genruo's plan, right? Xiejin turned his head and glanced at the sedan chair. I wonder what the prince's purpose is. Purpose? Porcelain white slender fingers flipped the book carelessly, and Genruo's voice sounded very angry. Of course, to get that guy who occupied the magpie's nest out of Dongling. The guy who occupied the magpie's nest? Xiejin's eyebrows deepened slightly, thinking in his heart whether the person he was talking about was Rongyu or Nan 11. This person designed to release the prophecy right at the beginning, creating the illusion that Dongling was besieged. The 800-mile rush was not a joke. If it weren't for the spies of Juxiao Pavilion everywhere controlling the movements of all parties, I'm afraid I really have to believe that Dongling is now in a situation of being surrounded by enemies. So Xiejing could see that Prince Genruo was serious this time. He really wanted to cause chaos in Dongling, and it would be best if it could be a mess, and his posture must be aimed at Rongyu or Nan 11. Or, it was aimed at both of them. Occupying the magpie's nest. Although it is not right, the only people who can be called this are Rongyu and Nan 11, because they are from the Great Zhou, but they have become the masters of Dongling. Xiejin said in a light tone, does Prince Genruo have a grudge against Dongling? What does it have to do with you? Xiejin choked. This was the first time since he grew up that someone asked him a question and was mercilessly retorted, and he felt fresh for a while. After a moment of silence, he smiled nonchalantly. Although the prince has supernatural powers, Yu-Gi-Oh is just a small country after all. If Dongling is really angered, the territory of a few thousand miles should not be able to withstand the attack of Dongling's iron cavalry for half a month. Hearing this, Genruo just snorted coldly, as if he was disdainful. Then there was no movement in the sedan chair, only the slight sound of pages being turned past by his ears. Xiejin was not angry, but said lightly, or I should change my guess. The prince has a grudge against the regent of Dongling. He is the regent of Dezhou, not Dongling, Genruo said in a slightly cold voice. As a minister of Dongling, you are also a person who forgets your ancestors. Xiejin's face turned green, and suddenly he wanted to send this annoying guy back to the city gate with a palm. If this person hadn't had some ability, and he really wanted to know what purpose he had here, he would have smashed his sedan chair to pieces, leaving him in a state of disgrace. He had no grace at all. Let's see if he can still do it. This indifferent and desireless deity-like attitude. However, this thought only flashed through his mind. As the most famous nobleman in Dongling Imperial City, how could he do something so out of control and violent? In order to avoid worsening his bad mood, Xiejin didn't take the initiative to speak again for the next section of the road. However, considering Prince Genruo's slutty personality, they drove at a not too fast speed and didn't arrive at the palace gate until dark. Previously, when the Prince of Northern Xinjiang and the Prime Minister of South Vietnam entered the palace, they had to get off the car and walk in, and take off their weapons and hand them over to the guards on duty for safekeeping, but Prince Genruo did not abide by this rule. Either let Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent come to pick me up in person, or let this prince enter the palace. He still maintained a reclining posture, too lazy to move, as if he didn't see the ministers waiting outside the palace gate to watch the excitement. Otherwise, it's not impossible for this prince to return home immediately. But in this way, the illusion of various countries besieging Dongling will soon become a reality. Don't say that I didn't remind you when the time comes. Dongling has maintained peace for 600 years. It will end from now on, and the next few years will be full of smoke, wars, people are in dire straits, and people are displaced. That's enough. Siejin waved his hand, signaling for the imperial army to let him go. Prince Zanruo is a distinguished guest, so he should be entertained. The ministers looked at the blue sedan swaying gently in the wind with subtle eyes, and secretly said that this prince from the Yu Kingdom was really quite handsome and dressed in such a special style. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix.